In 2010, I attended Camp Ernst, a summer camp that my parents enrolled me in. Luckily, my best friend Keith also signed up, so I didn't have to go alone. The camp lasted for 2 weeks and had all the typical features you'd expect in a summer camp, like the cabins, a big lodge for activities and dining, and several other small buildings scattered around the campgrounds. Keith and I stayed up late every night playing Nintendo DS games together. One night, well past 2:00 a.m., we were still playing when someone opened the cabin door. We panicked and quickly hid our DS under our pillows, pretending to be asleep. We heard footsteps moving around the room, coming closer to my bed. For a moment, I felt someone breathing softly on my neck before the footsteps moved away and headed back towards the door. Once the door shut, I turned to Keith and told him how scared I was. We resumed playing our DS when I suddenly received a text message on my phone asking why we were still awake. Those of us who had cell phones were given a list of phone numbers belonging to the camp counselors that we could contact in case of an emergency. However, the number that texted me did not belong to any counselor that I knew of. I texted back, asking who it was, but received no response. I shared my concern with Keith, who did not have a cell phone, and he was equally frightened. We assumed it must be a counselor and continued playing our Nintendo DS games with the brightness turned down low. Suddenly, we heard the back door of the cabin open. We threw our DS under our pillows again, but this time there were no more footsteps. Then my phone vibrated, and I received another text message from the same number. The message claimed to be from a counselor named Tony, asking me to come outside to the back of the cabin as they had something to tell me. Keith and I both found this suspicious, especially since we just heard the back door open. I cautiously walked towards the back of the cabin and peered down the hall to the back door, but I saw no one. When I got closer to the screen door, I noticed a section of the wall had caved in, and through the opening, I saw an old, creepy-looking man hiding. I immediately ran back to my bed, screaming for help and waking everyone up. Suddenly, the back door slammed shut, and a counselor rushed in through the front door. I told them what had happened, and they searched the campsite's perimeter, but the man was nowhere to be found. What still haunts me to this day is how the man got my phone number. My best guess is that he somehow found the list of phone numbers that the counselors had made, but how did he know who I was? This experience still occasionally creeps into my dreams. When I was 13 years old, I attended a summer camp for teenagers aged 13 to 16. It was a traditional camp with a rich history. However, there was an unsettling incident that took place at the camp involving an old woman named Miss Graham, who had worked in the cafeteria and had passed away under undisclosed circumstances. One night, while everyone else was fast asleep, I found myself unable to drift off. The bright light from the full moon flooded the room, and I tossed and turned on my uncomfortable cot. Frustrated and defeated, I sat up and rubbed my eyes. As I opened them again, I noticed that the light coming in from the window across from me was blocked by the head of a person. It was an older woman wearing a red cap, and I couldn't help but wonder why she was there. I was filled with a sense of dread when I realized that she was looking straight at me, her eyes locked onto mine. In a panic, I turned over and pretended to be asleep, feeling like a frightened child hiding under the covers. I waited a moment before daring to look back at the window. As I lay in bed, the room appeared to grow darker, and I sensed that something was amiss. I looked up at the window directly above my cot, and to my horror, the same older woman in the red cap was once again staring directly down at me from only 3 feet away. Fearing for my safety, I covered myself with blankets and trembled with fear. I have no recollection of how long I remained like that before finally falling asleep. The following day, I approached one of the adults running the camp and recounted my unsettling experience with the woman in the red cap. As I spoke, the adults exchanged troubled glances, and one of the women remarked that it sounded eerily similar to Miss Graham. Upon hearing her name, my heart skipped a beat. To this day, I cannot be sure if the woman at the window was a real person, a figment of my imagination, or perhaps even Miss Graham herself. When I was a little kid, I went to a sleepaway camp in Pennsylvania, which left a lasting impression on me. Being an introvert, meeting other children during orientation on the first day was nerve-wracking. I would have rather been at home playing Super Nintendo, but some outgoing kids eventually befriended me. I can't recall the name of the kid who initiated our friendship, so let's call him Mike. Mike was a short blonde boy who always wore a Yankees hat. At that time, I thought he was the coolest kid in camp, but now I suspect he might have turned into a troublemaker during high school. On the first day of camp, while touring the grounds, Mike and I stumbled upon an old, abandoned bunk building that piqued our curiosity. We asked one of the counselors what it was, but he didn't know anything about it. All he could tell us was that it had been unused for years. On the final night of camp, when everyone was getting ready to sleep, Mike whispered in my ear that he wanted to explore the abandoned bunk for fun. I wanted to impress Mike, so I agreed to go along. We ventured outside and stuck close to the abandoned bunk, waiting for the lights and the counselors' bunks to go out. It didn't take long since it was late at night. My heart was pounding the whole time because I wasn't cut out for this sort of mischief, especially at that age. Mike led the way down the pavement that led through the counselors' bunks to the abandoned bunk building. As we approached the front door, we noticed that it was boarded up, which only added to our curiosity. Fortunately, there was a window that was already busted open, so we climbed in through it. These bunk buildings were relatively spacious and could house up to 10 campers each. This one was no different. As we stood in the dark bunk, it was freezing inside, and we had to extend our arms in front of us to avoid colliding with anything. I repeatedly bumped into a bunk bed and heard Mike doing the same. Then I heard someone bouncing on one of the beds. "Stop messing around," I told him, assuming he was goofing around on one of the old bunk beds. However, Mike's voice came from the opposite end of the room. "That's not me," he said. "I thought that was you." In a pitch-black room in an unused building, we heard the sound of someone bouncing on a squeaky mattress. Needless to say, we freaked out and ran for the window through which we had entered. The window was tiny, but we managed to escape. As I waited for Mike to climb out, the bouncing sound suddenly ceased, replaced by a loud thud. It seemed that whoever had been jumping on the bed had leaped off it. I leaped up to the window and was scrambling through when I felt two hands clutching at my foot, attempting to drag me back in. Fortunately, I had already made it through the window, and I pulled free, running back to our bunk with Mike. We locked the door behind us, unsure of what to do. We considered running to the head counselor's bunk to report what had happened, but we were afraid of getting in trouble. Looking back, that was a foolish decision, but we managed to make it through the night unscathed and went home the following day, ready to tell our tale. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and sharing it to support me. The best is yet to come.